What's up everybody, this is Master Ian Gamer with some very exciting, or at the very least interesting news regarding Overwatch 2, specifically when it comes to the balance of some of the heroes come Overwatch's sequel. This information was posted on the Overwatch forums by Andy B, who is a fairly new community manager who's a part of the Overwatch team, and recently he's been going on the forums and sharing a decent amount of interesting information regarding the balance of heroes come Overwatch 2. So today I want to cover some new information he just posted, as well as some information he discussed last week, which I didn't actually get a chance to make a video on. So be sure to subscribe and hit up that bell icon if you enjoy this video, and otherwise, let's jump right on in. So first up, he had a pretty sizable post earlier today talking specifically about support heroes and giving a bit of either good news or bad news regarding Brigitte, depending on how you look at it and depending on, well, what your stance on her as a hero is currently. So starting off, I've been seeing this question pop up quite a bit since our post last week, so I grabbed some time with Jeff and Josh from the Hero Design and Balance team this afternoon. Here's what they had to say. Are there any significant changes to how supports are expected to function/feel to play in Overwatch 2? So far, we've made a ton of changes to how the support role works in Overwatch 2. There are some meaningful changes, such as removing the stun from Brigitte, more on her specific rebalancing efforts in the future. However, for the most part, the playstyle of your favorite support heroes should feel familiar and similar to retail. Whew, boy, now I'm going to talk a bit more about that removal of Brigitte's stun in just a minute. First, I want to finish covering this main big post though, so let's just keep going on with this. I'm wondering if that will affect the support's old methods of self-healing. Will abilities like Biotic Orb/Grenade and Regenerative Burst stay the same in Overwatch 2, or are they being altered with the new support passive in mind? And for reference, the passive they're referring to is the fact that all support heroes will have a passive health regeneration effect, like what Mercy has currently in Overwatch 1. So the dev's response was, as of now, we have no plans to remove self-healing from these heroes. Abilities like Regenerative Burst and Biotic Grenade remain a powerful part of their respective heroes' identities, and will be tuned to account for the passive healing abilities also available. With less health bars to juggle, how does that affect single target healers in playtesting? Specifically, this is referencing the fact that in Overwatch 2, there will only be 5 players per team instead of 6. In our playtests, having one less tank made it clear to us that tanks generally contribute much more damage than they mitigate, even on retail. Because of the drop in overall damage being dealt out, supports were actually too effective at keeping the entire team alive, so we're testing a tuned down healing output across the board to ensure that team fights still resolve in a way that doesn't feel too drawn out or frustrating to play against. So that's the end of this big post Andy B posted today. There is more stuff to cover, but first I just want to sort of break down this big post because there is a bunch of stuff to dig into here. First and foremost, they flat out confirmed that Brigitte's stun is going to be removed in Overwatch 2. Now, when I first read this, I couldn't quite remember if this is something they'd already confirmed in the past, because there has been so much discussion in the community specifically regarding Brigitte and what they could do with her in Overwatch 2, and of course, one of the biggest ideas thrown around is that, oh, they could remove her stun, since everyone hates the stun, despite how horrifically it's been nerfed over the years. So I actually had to go back and check through some old statements to see if the devs themselves had actually referred to the removal of Brigitte's stun before, and it looks like they haven't, which means I think this is the first time they've confirmed she won't have a stun in Overwatch 2. Now, at this point, I feel like I should probably just make an entire dedicated video talking about how Brigitte has been absolutely butchered over the years and how they might attempt to sort of fix her come Overwatch 2. So I'm certainly not going to delve into all my thoughts on her as a hero right here in this video, but I will say, removing the stun, that's certainly going to piss off a lot of people and make a bunch of other people jump for joy, because boy is that a controversial ability on an extremely controversial hero. Personally, I'm not super against them removing the stun. I think if they changed her kit enough overall to give her something to sort of replace the stun in terms of utility, then I'd very much be in favor of them removing it. As long as it ends up making her a more interesting and fun to play hero, then I'm totally down. But certainly the idea of them further stripping tools from her kit isn't something I'm typically a fan of when it comes to hero balance, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see how they end up handling her, and yeah, I'll probably do a video at some point in the future going more in depth with my thoughts on Brigitte as a hero. Alright, so now jumping onto some of the other things Andy B talked about, the other main post he made today, which I wanted to point out, was a little tease for the upcoming 2021 Halloween Terror event. In response to a post titled "Extremely Excited for the Coming Halloween Terror Event," Andy B responded by saying, "I'm gonna be that dev and say that I can't wait for you all to see this year's skins. They look outstanding." Now, outside of just the excitement of hearing the devs acknowledge the upcoming Halloween event, we don't really learn anything from this. Basically, they say every skin is outstanding in its own right, so it's not like we're really learning anything new here. But certainly the Halloween event is one of the more popular events of the year, and clearly a bunch of people are already getting hyped for it, which is why I might mention, if you haven't already, be sure to check out the video I did not too long ago covering the start date and other details of the upcoming Halloween event, and I'll have that video linked in the cards on screen now, so be sure to check it out if you're as hyped for the Halloween event as I am, and it sounds like many other people are too. Now, moving on from some of the things Andy B said on the forums today, he was actually active about a week ago on the forums as well, talking about some changes to tank and DPS heroes in Overwatch 2, and due to some other things going on with me at the time, I didn't really get a chance to cover those in a video, so I'm just going to go ahead and read through those now and give my quick thoughts, just because I think it's an interesting thing to discuss, and I'm sure there are some of you who haven't even seen these comments yet. So here's the big post from a few days ago. This has been a reoccurring theme in conversation since the PvP livestream. Tank players want to understand their role in a new 5v5 world. I talked to the hero design and balance team about this thread and have summed up some thoughts below. Tanks in Overwatch 2 remain both disruptive line breakers and push leading protectors. Changing from 2 tanks to 1 creates a new dynamic, where each player, including damage and supports, needs to be more careful about the way they position themselves. Flanking potentially becomes more potent as a strategy, and because teams aren't relying on holding the high ground due to the defensive capabilities of multiple tanks, maps are being used to their fullest, which has resulted in some fun playtests. Tanks will still be the unquestioned authority on blocking damage, however they won't be simultaneously contending with the opposing tank, blocking nearly all incoming damage for their team. Changing to a single tank means that they will be tuned to be slightly tougher on an individual level. Tanks with overwhelming team defensive capabilities, like Reinhardt, will have their group protections reduced, while their damage and utility will be improved. To address the pressure that a single tank position can put on an individual player, there is an assumption that if the tank dies, the fight is over. Realistically speaking, any player dying in a 5v5 scenario can mean a team fight loss for their team, so everyone is going to have a bit more pressure put on their individual performances. That said, tanks not being responsible for mitigating overwhelming damage for the entire team removes some pressure from the role. This also opens up an avenue for them to focus more on getting in the opposing team's face with damage and disrupting enemy lines. In our own playtests, we have observed an interesting dynamic where tanks are not usually the first to die. Support is better able to maintain their front line, creating a scenario where healing is more focused since it's not split trying to keep multiple tanks alive. Double barrier team comps is another area directly impacted by this change. In Overwatch 2, there is a maximum of 1 shield tank per team, which leads to changes in how we tune and adjust the total uptime for these barriers. This comes in the form of lowering their health, increasing their cooldowns, or lowering their durations. We want barriers to feel impactful, albeit less oppressive, across the game. Tanks rooted in mobility, such as D.Va, Wrecking Ball, and Winston, will see their utility improved, gaining additional defensive stopping power, and in some cases, more freedom to flex between having an offensive impact and being a defensive bulwark for their team. I do understand that some of us have very strong feelings about changing to a single tank, and it's going to take more than a response like this to fully convince you that this is a net positive change. To be completely candid, I understand that you need to get your hands on the game and experience it for yourself to fully form an opinion. As someone who was an Overwatch fan and player before I ever joined the team, I have a huge amount of empathy for folks who are frustrated waiting for Overwatch 2. Speaking as someone who plays retail comp nightly and playtests 2 almost daily, it's difficult to envision what the experience is actually like until you've been in the environment and played several matches. I sincerely do not mean this in a gatekeepery or we know better than you tone, but more to create an understanding that we get your sentiment and understand where your feedback is coming from. Now, there are a number of follow-up posts I'd like to read as well in response to this main post he made, but first I just want to give my quick thoughts on it. By and large, I mostly agree with everything he says here when it comes to Overwatch tank heroes, because honestly, while I do have a bit of skepticism when it comes to 5v5 and the fact there's only going to be one tank instead of two, I really do think it's a situation where we just have to get our hands on the 5v5 format of Overwatch 2 and actually get a feel for it ourselves to really understand how and why it evidently is a better route for them to take the game. We can speculate all day about how to rebalance tanks to make them work better in 5v5 and even design our own version of 5v5 using the workshop, but ultimately it is going to take us actually playing a beta or some form of Overwatch 2 before I think we really will be getting an adequate understanding of how 5v5 and having only a single tank is going to actually feel to play. Now, there were some comments left on this main post by Andy B, which Andy then went back and responded to. One of these is, with the reduction of crowd control all around, and evidently a mobility creep with tanks to make them more aggro, plus the announced mobility creep with DPS, there seems to be less and less capability to deal with flankers and hypermobility. Andy then responds saying, this concern is something we're paying close attention to in our playtests. So far, we've seen that heroes like Doomfist, Wrecking Ball, and to some degree Tracer will need to be rebalanced and maybe even nerfed to make sure they're not super overpowered in the new meta. Changes like the ones we've discussed in the PvP livestream and here in this thread are incredibly complicated. They have far-reaching ramifications throughout the game. Your question correctly assumes that they can never be evaluated in a vacuum. Again, that's basically reiterating my own thoughts on it, where we can speculate all we want about how great or terrible the changes they propose for Overwatch 2 are going to be, but really at the end of the day, it's going to take us actually playing them in the sequel to understand how they really feel and how and why they're the right direction to go forward. Another comment mentions that my doubts come from the fact that in the past, things have been tweaked by how fun they were to play against. Andy responded, I understand where your feedback is coming from. It remains to be seen how removing crowd control and utility from certain damage heroes will impact the perceived funness of those abilities being used by tanks and supports in the future. That's a fair concern and one that we'll be paying close attention to as we develop Overwatch 2. Another comment, are the playtests taking into account new heroes as well? Without going into detail, yes. Obviously, they're taking new heroes into account because it would be dumb if they just designed and balanced Overwatch 2 completely around the original cast and then tried to tack on the new heroes, since we know many new heroes are already fully playable in Overwatch 2 at this point, and they just haven't been revealed yet. So yes, certainly Overwatch 2's new heroes are being factored in playtests as well. You mentioned Doomfist getting a possible rework / rebalance / nerf due to less stuns being in the game. What are the odds of his punch jump, or whatever you want to call it, getting removed? I understand this is a big part of his mobility, but I also feel like it's by far his most fun way of getting around. Real quick note, Absolutely, it's his most fun way of getting around. It's one of my personal favorite parts of playing Doomfist. But anyways, Andy's response: I am not confirming here the extent to which we're looking at Doomfist. It would be disrespectful to the hardworking members of Team 4 to not give their work our best effort in revealing it. But, speaking more generally, existing hero reworks and or balance changes are a part of our larger comms plan for Overwatch 2. We want for heroes to have the appropriate amount of space and time to shine, and we'll be doing what we can to create some great reveal content that will hopefully surprise and delight you. So that was a sort of interesting response he had, which mainly seemed to focus more on the idea of revealing changes and reworks and other content for the sequel, as opposed to addressing the specific question of how Doomfist is going to be changed. But with that being said, maybe he's hinting at the fact that Doomfist will be undergoing some significant changes, and thus will require a more fitting reveal of his changes, as opposed to just saying what they are here on the forums preemptively. Though evidently Brigitte didn't deserve that same luxury, but again, it's Brig, what do you expect for her at this point? Anyways, that does it for all the information we have for Overwatch 2 from Andy B on the Overwatch forums for the time being. And whew, it actually feels good to be able to look at the Overwatch forums and gain some useful non-psychotic information. It's been a long time since the devs have really used the forums at all, and it doesn't surprise me why, but regardless, I'm just glad that we have some more things to talk about and look at regarding Overwatch 2, since we do know it's probably starting to actually sort of get close to the time period where we can expect to see more hype and more reveals for the sequel. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching this video. Definitely let me know your thoughts on all the things I've covered here today down in the comments below. Specifically, I'm curious to hear what you all think about Brigitte losing her stun in Overwatch 2. Since it's something that, in the back of my mind, I think I always sort of considered to be inevitable, but now that we have official confirmation, I'm sure there will be very much polite debate regarding this upcoming change for her. Otherwise, though, be sure to subscribe, follow me on Twitter, hit up that bell icon, and come join my Discord server to hang out and never miss any of my future Overwatch content. Special thanks to my YouTube channel members who help make this video possible, and if you'd like to join them to earn some cool rewards, like getting your name at the end of my videos, then just hit that join button down below. Otherwise, this is Master Ian Gamer signing off, and until next time, have a great day.